Hi everyone, today I'm going to show you how I can create this animation in Blender. So let's get started. First let's delete everything and now go to Edit, Preferences and make sure that you have the ANT Landscape add-on enabled. What this add-on allows you to do is to add a landscape, as the name suggests. Now go down here and set the subdivisions to times 2. Oh. First let's delete everything and now go to Edit, Preferences and enable the ANT Landscape add-on. This one. What this allows you to do is, as the name suggests, add a landscape. Like this, for example. You can go down here and choose any preset that you like, but I'm going to go with this one. Now for the subdivisions, let's multiply that by 2 or 3. I think I'm going to go with 3. Now let's add a UV sphere and Ctrl 3 to subdivide it by 3. Go to the modifiers and Ctrl A, apply the modifier. Now scale it down and move it up and position it somewhere around here, like this. Now before we go on, I recommend that you save. I'm going to call it Abstract Mountain. Now, with the sphere selected, let's add a Boolean modifier and select the landscape. And as you can see, now this part of the sphere that intersects with the landscape is removed. Now let's apply that modifier, Ctrl A, and this is what we have now. So let's shade smooth and go down here and under normals check auto smooth. Now I'm going to set up the camera real quick. Shift A and add the camera. Ctrl Alt 0, rotate it like this. I think I'm going to position it differently. I think this looks better. Oh, and now let's move the sphere up and move the camera back a little bit more. By the way, if you want to move it like this, you just need to press G and set. I'm going to make this a looping animation, so let's set the end frame to 100. Go to frame 101 and press I to insert a keyframe for the location and rotation. Now go to frame 1 and G, set again, move it closer to the sphere and now rotate it on the Y. Keyframe both the rotation and location again, and now we have this animation. Now let's go to the shading tab, go to camera view, and for the world properties, first let's go to rendered view and set it to cycles if you haven't already. Now let's go to the world properties, under color, select sky texture and set the error dust in the zone to 3. Now let's add a cube and scale it by 100. Press new and delete the principal BSDF and add a principled volume. There. Connect it to the volume and set the density to 0.025. Sometimes when you add the volume and don't move the viewport, you won't see the volume. And as you can see now, I can see it. Now let's select the sphere, press New, and delete the principled BSDF again. Add a glass shader, connect it to the surface, and let's set the ROR to something like this, for example, and make it slightly blue. Somewhere around here. And now let's select the landscape, press New, set the metallic to 1 and the roughness to 3.38. Now add a color ramp, connect the color to the base color and make the black something like this and the white something similar but darker. A little more dark like this. Now press Ctrl T with the color ramp selected if you have the Node-RENG add-on installed. Now delete the image texture and connect the vector to the vector. Instead of UV we are going to use object, so plug it into the vector. And now add a Musgrave texture. Plug that in here. Set the scale to 400, the detail to 16, and the dimension to 0. So. Now let's add a noise texture. Set the scale to 10, detail to 8, and the roughness to 0.45. Now let's connect the vector to the normal and add a bump node. Set the strength to 0.5 and connect the vector to the vector. Vector to vector, like this. Now let's go back to layered mode and add an empty. Let's hide the cube real quick. Go into rendered view and up here click on face, and now with the empty selected, if we press G and Control, it's going to move on the faces of the sphere. Now let's select the camera and check depth of field and select the empty. Maybe let's go to render preview for this. And we can bring back the cube, by the way. Now let's go to the end to frame 100 and set the f-stop to something that you like. I'm going to render view again. I think this looks good. 4.6. Maybe let's change this back to increment, just in case we want to change anything. Now under the render properties, I am rendering at 128 samples and I use denoise. If you have an NVIDIA card you can use optics, otherwise you can use OpenImage denoise, but I prefer optics. Now under color management, let's set it to standard and let's set the look to high contrast. The exposure, let's set that to -1, and I think this looks much better. Now for the output settings, output properties, let's set a folder. I'm going to create a new folder for this. And let's call it rendered images. If we put an underscore after the name, Blender is going to automatically assign numbers to the frames. Now let's hit accept, go to Compositing and enable use nodes. To create the setup here with denoising image, denoising normal and denoising albedo, you will have to check denoising data and then just add a denoise node set to accurate. After Blender is done rendering, I'm going to show you how I can compile the separate images into one video. So now let's hit save again, go to render and render animation. After it has finished rendering, let's close this window, go up here to the plus sign and go to video editing. Now let's hit Shift A, and you're probably going to have to locate the folder where you have your images. You can do that by hovering over here and pressing Ctrl C, and then paste it in here and delete the name rendered images in this case. Now press A, enter, and now we have the animation in the timeline, or the sequencer. Now let's go to the end here, and let's set the end here to something like 600. Now let's hit Shift A again, image sequence, and this time sort it by modified date. This is basically going to add the images in reverse. So press A again and hit enter, and just to be safe, let's Shift A image sequence again and sort again and select name, but don't add the images. This is just because Blender will, when you open it the next time, it will sort the images by the modified date again, which you probably don't want. Now let's close this, select those two and Shift D and move them here, and do the same again. Now move them here, and as you can see it will loop now if we press play. Now let's press save again, and for the file format let's set it to FFmpeg video, encoding set the container to MPEG-4, and for the output quality let's set that to high quality. And now let's go to render and render animation again. Now it is going to compile the images into one video. So that's it with the tutorial. I hope you liked it. If you did, please press like. If you didn't, press dislike. And maybe let me know in the comments what I should do next. I'll see you next time.